the right club. Be the right club today.
Johnny, that's better than most. How about in? That is better than most. Better than most!
Expect anything different?
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the No Laying Up podcast, presented as always by our friends at Titleist. The first hour of this pod is going to be ad-free thanks to those very friends at Titleist. Just want to give a quick shout out. They just posted Neil's playing lesson with Russell Henley on YouTube. Lots of cool nuggets in there. Go check it out. Today's episode is on a topic I've wanted to dive into for a long time: the finances of professional golf. PGA Tour money list, it used to be the end-all, be-all determinant of success in professional golf. And it kind of goes against everything we're taught in society about money, which is that you shouldn't talk about how much money you make or how much you spend. In professional sports, it's different. Earnings are mostly public, and I'm definitely guilty of just assuming because someone has made $10 million on the PGA Tour that they're set for life.
People just look at the big number, like, how much did you make on tour? It's like, yeah, I made that much technically, but
I was a lot older than I'd like to admit when I started to learn a little bit more about the expense side of being a touring professional. Flights, hotels, caddy fees, coaches, mental coaches, physical therapists, country club fees, rental cars. The expenses really do add up.
my last year on the Korn Ferry Tour, like I said, I made $108,000, but I probably spent $108,000 to do my job that year. So it's like, that's a push.
In this episode, we're going to break down a ton of this stuff. You're going to hear from a lot of people. First up is going to be our old friend, Denny Cash, who is sort of a catch-all representative of all the interviews we did anonymously for this podcast. If you didn't listen to the prior Denny Cash episode that we did, the quick synopsis: look, it's a lot easier to get some of the behind-the-scenes golf people to tell you stuff if they don't have to put their name on it and speak it into a microphone. Not a lot of agents or managers want to be on a microphone talking about their players, specifically about how much money they're making. So to kind of add a layer of vagueness to all of this, Denny is going to be kind of playing the role of 5 or 6 different interviews that I did for this podcast, all kind of combined into one. Just call him an industry expert agent. Again, this will make sense when you start listening. We also added an extra layer of vagueness, removed some names, specific names of players, as you might imagine, for some additional anonymity. But we talked to Denny about a lot of stuff, but specifically how much these players are making off the course, with a lot of different examples spanning multiple tours, spanning both the men's and women's game. You also hear an interview with longtime tour pro Steve Wheatcroft, who is an open book about essentially everything when it comes to finances.
I remember when I did go through a nice run, looking at my checking account one day, and there was $975,000 in my checking account, doing absolutely nothing for me.
Korn Ferry Tour pro James Nicholas, who documents a lot of financial stuff on his social media channels.
If you need something, you get it. I don't care how much it is. I don't care what it costs. I don't care where you have to go for it. If it's going to make you better, you got to get it.
Aspiring Korn Ferry Tour caddy Ryan Murray and his journey to try to get on a bag on the Korn Ferry Tour and how the finances work at that level.
Last year, it was more so just I would spend money on my credit card and my wife would tell me to stop.
Also, DJ tracked down our old friend Lauren Coughlin for a few brief questions at the end. So without any further delay, thank you everyone for tuning in. We're going to kick things off here with Denny Cash. Denny, it's great to see you. As always, you know, when we first visited with you, you talked a lot about your deep, storied career on kind of the sell side, the sponsorship side around professional golf events. But you've also been an agent for players, professional golfers of all skill levels for 60, 70 years as well. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Chris, great to see you again. Love being on the show. You guys are doing a great job. Love what you guys are doing. Yeah, golf's a small world. You know, you touch a lot of points. You meet a lot of the same people. It's a lot of hotel bars, you know, where that you're running into people and you're just kind of bouncing around this crazy industry from job to job. And yeah, it's good to be able to talk a little bit about player representation today.
A lot of disclaimers on this, of course. We are blending a lot of different interviews, conversations we've had spanning a lot of different years into this one character of Denny Cash.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Any names that we use here, we'll tell you when we're getting specific on a name potentially, and then we might be being super vague, pulling random names that are, of course, not clients of Denny. Of course.
You don't stay in this industry for as long as I have, burning those kinds of bridges.
All right, Denny, talk to me about what the range of off-course income looks like for professional golfers. And let's start on the men's side.
Sure. Not going to surprise you here. The range is wide. It is a big spectrum of how much players earn off the golf course. And I think without giving you any names, of course, you know that.
Of course. Yeah.
I'm just thinking of names that pop into my head. I know of one multiple major champion, we'll call him, makes easily over $15 million off the golf course. Another one that pops in, another multiple major champion, probably 10 to 15 million in that range off the golf course. You know, another client of ours I'm thinking about, a multiple time winner on tour, probably right around $10 million. And then you have some, you know, you go down the spectrum to some of the lesser accomplished players, the lesser visible players. I'm going to pull some names. These are not my clients. Don't mean for you to take these names literally, but let's
just examples. These are just examples.
Let's say someone like a Doug Gim, a Ricky Castillo, Alex Smalley, guys that are nice players, you know, accomplished plenty in their young PGA Tour careers, but maybe not quite as visible as some of the guys you're watching every week on Sunday afternoon. They probably have deals, you know, that add up around $500,000. I think that's probably a good general rule of thumb for this conversation. And, you know, again, it's so oversimplified. It's going to vary from person to person, but a good rule of thumb is probably a replacement level type player on the PGA Tour probably makes about $500,000 a year in sponsorship money off the course.
How much does the world ranking matter when you're trying to sell a player? You know, is it as easy as looking at the official world golf rankings, going down the list and assuming that it goes in order from there on how much you make off the course?
Success helps, obviously, you know that, but it's not as tightly correlated as you would think. I think it's probably more about marketability and other factors. I think there's some guys, and you know, you'd be surprised. There are probably guys that are like top 20 guys in the world that have been very visible that can sometimes just be a little bit more difficult sells. Some of the European players, this is probably not a surprise, a little harder to sell, particularly to US based companies, you know, than players that are maybe of a lesser success level, sometimes even lesser talent. Let's take a guy like Rasmus Højgaard. I do not rep this player, of course, just pulling a name, but Rasmus is a proven winner, Ryder Cupper, done a lot of stuff. I would guess he's probably a tougher sell than someone ranked near him, you know, on the world rankings. Take a Mav McNeely, who they're both top 50 players, but Mav is a sponsorship dream, right? He's a very well spoken. He's great at corporate days. He can do a lot of stuff that a lot of these companies are looking for. And so I think that's one example of maybe world ranking not necessarily correlating directly to off the course success.
How much does, you know, sponsorship dollars, how much do they vary from, say, the Korn Ferry Tour to the PGA Tour? I mean, you know, some of these guys that bounce back and forth between those probably have a pretty good, you go down a level, not only are you playing for less purse, but I'm guessing the sponsorship dollars go into that. Do you build the contracts like that in a specific way to say, hey, this is my exposure level at the PGA Tour, here it is at Korn Ferry, and are those different prices?
They are. It's you're probably seeing a trend developing here, Chris. It varies, and so you know, for one instance, I'm just thinking about one of my clients who went from on the Korn Ferry Tour probably making $250, $300K off the course to, you know, he gets a PGA Tour card and overnight that kind of flips to 500, between 500 and 750. I would say. And a lot of that's, you know, it's just interesting, right? It's the same guy, same marketability, same everything. It's just a different tour, which I think is understandable. But a lot of that can also be incentive based too, to your question. You know, if he plays well, a lot of it's based on world ranking checkpoints and performance metrics. And I mean, all of that translates to visibility for the company, right? And how marketable, how visible is this player going to be? But they could push that 500, 750 up to $1 million if they play well. So there is upside for the player. There's a little bit of risk mitigation for the company. So it's a pretty good system that seems to work out for both sides.
We talk a lot on this podcast about wanting guys to participate in things, wanting them to be a part of extra content and things like that. You as an agent representing players, what do you do in terms of encouraging your players to be forward facing in content, and how does that help you in deals with different sponsorship groups?
It's complicated because it's a massive part of the world that we're living in. And I think you see the upside when you see a player who does it really, really well. You know, Max Homa is not a guy that I rep, but let's just take him as the crystallized example of a player who developed a great online personality and parlayed that into a lot of fans and probably a lot of sponsorships, right? That can also, I'm not saying that this is what happened with Max, but like that can also be a double-edged sword if you're a player who's chasing that kind of stuff and taking your eye off the ball. And, you know, I mean, at the end of the day, like a lot of this is just based on how well are you playing on the golf course, right? I mean, you can't shortcut your way to success in this just by amassing a bunch of Instagram followers. I think you can do that, you know, that helps, but it is a balance, right? Like you can't go all in and put all your eggs in this basket of being a pro influencer. Otherwise, I think you'd just be an influencer. And so my job is kind of like trying to figure out that balance and how players can keep their eye on the ball while also trying to maximize the things that some of these companies are looking for.
Have you seen players go off a certain end of the spectrum in the wrong direction?
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you see guys, you know, and women as well for that matter. Like you can chase the wrong metrics, right? I mean, at the end of the day, it's how fast can you get the ball in the hole is kind of the only thing that matters, and all the other stuff is sort of icing on the cake. And so when you see players lose that perspective on that, I think it can warrant maybe some tough phone calls and some advice that's sometimes well received and sometimes not. But I think the overarching thing is, as much as you don't want people to get distracted, is like, man, it is a valuable aspect to why these companies sponsor these players, right? I mean, there's a reason why you have a logo on the hat, and it's because if you show up in a YouTube video, you show up in an extra interview here, you show up in some clip that goes viral or something, like that's kind of the reason these companies are paying to be associated with you, is for the eyeballs that come from your visibility. And so it is a push and pull for sure. You want players to be open to those sorts of things without kind of losing sight of, you know, the actual long game here.
Some of these numbers we've talked about on the men's side, how do they compare to the top names on the LPGA Tour?
Chris, you know what I'm going to say? It varies, of course. I think what's interesting in the women's game, and this is true of the men's game too, as we were saying, but you can be a player in the women's game who's very, very marketable and not necessarily a top 5 player in the world. And I think some of those players, if you do things the right way, can make $2.5-5 million, maybe even more, off the golf course through just smart partnerships. And then I think if you look at the tip top of the market, I mean, obviously that's a player like Nelly, or specifically Nelly. Again, not one of my clients, but I'm just kind of making an educated estimation here. But she's probably making north of $10 million off the golf course a year. I mean, she's obviously got serious blue chip sponsorships. And then with someone, you know, like Nike, probably her most visible sponsorship, a lot of their contracts are based in incentives, like we were talking about earlier. And so in 2024, she had a monster year, right? She had to make a lot of money off the golf course just based on those incentives and all the upside in those deals. And so 2025, she didn't win. You know, it's a little bit of a down year by her standards. Maybe not quite north of $10 million, but I have to think 2024 was. And I think what's interesting with Nelly specifically too, again, not my client, is that if you kind of put the pieces together, Nike traditionally buys up a lot of the quote unquote inventory, right? I know Nelly's a little bit of a unique example because she has a sponsored hat where you have kind of the Goldman logo and the TaylorMade logo and some other stuff, and she's got a bag logo and whatever. But you think about a player like Scotty Scheffler, what sponsorship do you think of when you think of Scotty Scheffler? It's Nike and TaylorMade to an extent, right? But mostly it's Nike that's very visible. And so with a player like Nelly, she has all that Nike real estate kind of bought up, but she also has a lot of other partners kind of quote unquote behind the scenes, right? So she's doing a lot of other corporate days. She's doing a lot of other just obligations. And so I think for as much as people like to maybe knock her for not playing the Asian swing, you know, for instance, to start the season, some of that I think is fair, but it's interesting in that she probably has a lot more going on off the golf course than people realize, which either gets jammed into the very short off season on the LPGA, or, you know, she needs to do some of that during this time where she's not traveling to Asia. And so all those days have to come from somewhere is my point. And especially in the women's game when you're trying to max out your top end earning days. I mean, I understand kind of why it looks that way. And then as far as, Nelly's and the top players are one example, but more like rank and file, the quote unquote replacement level LPGA players, again, it depends. There's a range. I think a lot of the Asian players can get really solid deals with, Asian banks and Asian financial services companies and similar things like that. You see a lot of those sponsorships, which can maybe probably lead to around $1 million or so in off-course earnings. But then again, the replacement level kind of American and European players probably more in the like 200 to 500K range. So probably splitting somewhere between the Korn Ferry Tour and the PGA Tour.
What's an example of a way a player could make themselves more marketable? What's a dream client look like for you?
I think the first one that pops to mind is probably going to be someone that would pop to mind for a lot of your listeners as well. It's kind of an obvious answer, but let's look at someone like Joel Damon. Needless to say,
of course,
not a client of mine, of course. But I would say if he was a client of mine, pre-Netflix boom, Joel Damon takeover of the golf culture world, for a player like that, we're probably looking to get around 100K for a patch. Call it, this all varies, even has its own little nitty gritty minutia, but hat, collar, sleeve, chest, bag, like a patch like that, we're probably looking about 100K. I bet post Netflix that number's probably up around like 250. And so that's just very real. Exposure leads to more money type of estimation there. And so, I feel like all in, you add all those together and off course appearances and, whatever, I bet Joel probably makes in excess of $1 million off the course. And nobody loves Joel more than you and I, Chris, of course. But I think he would say he's been a below average tour player the last couple of years, right? And so for a below average tour player to make over $1 million that's a pretty crystal clear example of, being marketable and what that can do for you, because he's a positive brand that people want to be associated with, people want to be involved with.
I actually reached out to Joel to get an answer on this exact topic.
Solely Knowing Up crew. I appreciate the invite and the questions. I would say my bump from being just kind of a bucket hat wearing journeyman golfer on the financial aspects from being on Netflix has been incredible. I would say after the first year, immediately I went like 3x to 4x even. And instead of, maybe searching and hoping and reaching out, a lot of calls were coming in, and we had the opportunity to negotiate and say no to some people and find the best opportunity on that. So financially, probably 3 and 4x, honestly, for me off the golf course, but also opportunities on top of that as well, of just meeting more people, doing more cool things, and being in an elevated world, I would say, outside of just like an average journeyman golfer, as my career has kind of been. It's been really special. It's an unbelievable opportunity, and I'm happy to capitalize on a lot of that. As I say on that, it's the power of saying no is very interesting, and most golfers and most people don't have that, but it's been nice. But then also being able to arrange contracts for longer than 1 year or 6 months or 18 months. It's like, hey, you can actually form relationships with these people. You can have long-term deals, and you can form relationships and friendships, and knowing that this can be longer than, like I said, 18 months or a year, or whatever some of these contracts are. So you can really formulate a plan for the future of who's going to be on your team and who's going to go forward, and how it all kind of pieces together on that. So hope this helps. If not, I can try again. Cheers.
Talk to me about golf outings. This is honestly something, despite all my years of doing this, it doesn't compare to your years doing this, Denny, but all my years doing this, I'm kind of just learning about the full scale and scope of golf outings. Like, players go get paid to play golf with people in excess of just regular corporate days. What do they get paid for something like that?
Yeah, man, you should have seen the outings in the early days, Chris. Listen, the outings are easy money, straight up. This is an easy moneymaker for a lot of the guys out there. I think people would be surprised. Even some of the mid-tier, I keep saying replacement level players, but some of those guys can probably pull $50K for a single day, $75K for a single day with the right partner, playing 18 holes, yucking it up with clients and customers, maybe doing a little fireside chat in the evening.
Beat the pro, stand on one of the tee boxes, something like that. Yeah,
100%. I think for some of the top guys, that's probably around 100K, could push even north of that, which I think this part's going to sound ridiculous, but hear me out. I think some of those top guys, even for that amount of money, quickly start butting up against, is this worth my time? And that question, because it sounds easy. Go tee it up, play 18 holes, do a little dinner chat for 100K. It is easy, but man, those guys can overcommit themselves very quickly. And for a guy who's making tens of millions of dollars a year between on-course, off-course earnings, it is more complicated than that. When you start adding up the compounding effect, these are usually, a lot of times a Monday after a tournament when you're already pretty burnt. You want to go home and sleep in your own bed. It's another day on the road. It's another night of weird sleep, probably flying out that night. It's another day away from your kids or your spouse or your house or your dog or your whatever. It might shorten the next week if you have a tournament. The next week, it might affect your prep for, going and trying to win $4 million at a signature event. It just is not quite as simple as, let me just stack up as many of these corporate days as I possibly can. But it's also a balance there too. And this is where I think, players need to have good advice. Is we've all seen a million examples of guys who look like completely different players from year to year, right? People who fall off, they make a swing change, they make a coaching change, they make whatever, and they lose it. And they might make $10 million one year and they might make $2 million the next year. And you never know when that's going to happen. And so it is a delicate balance for a lot of these top guys of, how do I keep the train rolling and make sure that I am performing at the tip top of my abilities every possible time I tee it up? And also, I don't know how long it's going to last. And so how do I smash the glass and grab as much cash as I possibly can during the limited earning window of my life here? So it's a tough balance, but corporate outings are a good lever for that.
It's hard because we are talking serious dollars here, but as we'll learn throughout this episode as well, and as we've learned over the years, expenses in professional golf are real. Taxes in professional golf are real. And I guess I could be a little surprised at times that guys are willing to do things for relatively small amount of money when it compares to their career earnings and keep doing it into their 40s, 50s, and 60s.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because, like you said, the taxes are a little bit of a double-edged sword, right? You're only paying more taxes if you're making a lot more money, and so it does go hand in hand. But like you said, a lot of times the number on the sheet, even the number on the contract, is not really the number that's going into the bank account, and so you just got to be pretty smart about not chasing shiny objects, not getting blinded by, is this really $100,000 to go show up to this event? Or does that mean I have to find another flight home? Does that mean, what am I paying in taxes? What am I thinking about for expenses? Is anybody staying along with me? Am I extending lodging? Am I doing it's just, there's a lot that goes with it. And again, I know this can sound ridiculous because these are exorbitant amounts of money that we're talking about here, but just trying to illustrate that it's not all quite as simple as it probably seems.
Obviously, the equipment industry is a big one as it relates to professional golfers. How do you balance something that has such a great impact on the performance of your actual clients, yet also it could be some pretty easy, guaranteed upfront money? We see guys change equipment companies all the time. We see them chase dollars at times. We've seen it affect play. We've seen very effective changes from one equipment company to the next. But how do you deal with that? And do you kind of sometimes end up veering into career on-course golf advice towards some of your clients? Again, a tough struggle because you're going to get paid off that equipment deal.
Of course. This is it's a little bit of a test of the agent's incentives, I think, here, right? Because you've, like you said, you have a lot of power to give advice. You have a lot of power to give bad advice, and you have a lot of power to let your own interests get in the way of, I should say, your short-term interests get in the way of potentially your long-term interests. Because, if your guy plays as good as possible, you're going to make as much money as possible. That it does really come back to that at the end of the day. And so these can sometimes be very distracting, I think, for players. And I think what I would love, the dream for me, would be for a player to come to me and say, I'm a Titleist player, or I'm a TaylorMade player, I'm a like whatever their company
Titleist.
is.
Yeah, Titleist. It's Titleist.
Yeah, Titleist is, I know you guys have worked with Titleist for a long time. I would love for a player to come to me and say, I'm a Titleist player. Get me as much money as you can from Titleist. I'm going to play their clubs. I don't need to entertain other offers. I don't need the distraction. Because like you said, I've learned this lesson the hard way. I've been around for a long time, Chris. Learned this lesson with more than one player. The upfront money can be very tempting. It's not hard to convince yourself that the equipment's really similar. The irons are basically the same. I'm hitting the driver. I might even be hitting the driver better. Who knows if I make this change and that change and, this shaft, like you can, it's very easy to squint and convince yourself that this is no difference than what I've been playing the whole time. And I've just seen it happen enough times that I really try to convince my clients that if it feels like tinkering, if you're thinking it feels like tinkering, just don't mess with it. Just play the stuff that is going to make you confident, that's going to make you play your best golf. And I think what's kind of interesting from like a business perspective is with the increased spend from companies on NIL stuff, like at that level, junior, college, amateur type golf. I think the thinking is for a lot of companies, okay, if we can, you see a lot more players taking equipment much more seriously and saying, I don't want to change. I just want to play my best golf. So it's kind of like if we can head that off at the pass, if we can sign this young potential stud when he's 15, 16, 17 years old, maybe the thinking will be, well, he's not going to want to change when he's 23, 25, 27, 30, coming into the prime of his career. And maybe we can get that guy or gal at a little bit of a deal. So that's kind of an interesting one to watch, but I guess we'll see how that kind of plays out over the next 5 years or so.
All right. The question everyone wants to know about, talking about the PJs, the private jet travel, who's flying private? These guys everybody's flying private all the time. Isn't that right?
Great question, Chris. No, I don't think everybody's flying private all the time. I would say slightly more people than you would think are flying private. It's kind of how I would characterize it. A lot of these private aviation deals are interesting. They oftentimes, almost always, I would say, translate into essentially like hours. Think about it like credits for these flights. So let's say somebody signs a $200,000 quote unquote deal with a company. It's basically just $200,000 worth of hours for that private jet. So there's very little cash exchange here. And so what a lot of these people, a lot of these players will do is they'll take a look at their schedule for the upcoming year and basically decide like, how are we going to use this X number of hours? And so they'll look for choke points. They might live in, I don't know, they might live in Dallas or Arizona or whatever. And they look at Hilton Head and they say, God, it's going to be a pain in the ass to get from Scottsdale to Hilton Head and back. If I'm not playing the week before, I'm not playing the week after, whatever it is. And so they'll say, okay, I'm going to burn some hours there. They might look at, I don't know, family vacation they have coming up. Cause like, it's one thing to travel by yourself, right? It's another thing you hear players talk about, like, man, you start traveling with 3 kids and a spouse and maybe a nanny and yada, yada, yada. And it can just be a lot of moving parts trying to get to the airport and get through TSA screening or whatever. So I think some of the players will look at like weeks where they're traveling with families, weeks where they're even going on vacation, right? A family vacation is supposed to be relaxing from, compared to traveling to go play pro golf. So that might be a time where they want to go use some hours. And so it's up to different players on how they want to use that stuff. But I hope that answers your question, Chris, as far as how some of that gets used.
It does. And it's the interesting factor I've maybe viewed a little differently over the years is like, man, you're really paying $50K extra or whatever it might, because guys will also, on top of some of their deals, spend some money on private jet flights, you know, and buy some hours through some of these companies. But it's to say, all right, if getting me home this night cost me $50,000 in cash or $50,000 in credits or whatever that might be on the private jet, if it gets me home this night, I wake up in my own bed, gives me 2 days of rest before I get back to here on this day, or it gets me back from whatever event, and I'm rested and I make one more putt in the top 10 in this next week, it has already paid for itself.
I've even heard players describe it as, on the flip side, is less getting home and more just like getting to a tournament, right? Like, let's say that they played, the night before, they finished late on a Sunday, maybe they were in contention and they're playing the next week. And it's like, okay, if I there's no flights that leave Sunday night. So that means I got to leave mid-morning on Monday because I don't want to get up at 4 a.m. after burning it all week on the golf course. Does that mean, okay, now I'm going to have to connect and I'm not going to be able to play a practice round on Monday when I get to the tournament. And so now I'm behind. That means I got to play Tuesday and Wednesday. And then I'm a little more burnt for Thursday. And then maybe I finish 1 or 2 shots worth. Like you could see the train of thought on my thinking versus, oh man, if I can take a jet whenever I wake up on Monday morning, I get there, at a much better time on Monday afternoon. I can go play the front 9 on Monday, do all my normal work. And then I can go play the back 9 on Tuesday, do all my normal work. I can take Wednesday off, basically, go hit balls, do any pro-am stuff I got to do, just make that a 30% of, the day that it could be prep wise. All of a sudden you're a lot more ready to go on Thursday. And it's just easy to see the conventional thinking there about how, again, I know we're talking about huge numbers here, but how 50 grand can start to feel worth it is when you're playing in a $20-25 million golf tournament. It's like, man, that adds up quickly if you can shoot 1 or 2 shots better. And so that's the gamble, is whether or not it's going to pay off.
Do you, as agents, touch all the money that comes in the doors? Do you guys pay the caddies? Do you, pay the coaches, stuff like that? I mean, I'm just wondering how far the agents' tentacles reach.
Rarely will that pop up. We as agents take in the sponsor deals. We run a lot of that kind of account management, so to speak. And so we'll run all the payment and processing on that. We'll take our cut of that, but the rest is usually flowing through financial advisor, business manager, someone like that, who's kind of doing more of the other, what almost seems like more life stuff, right? They're doing a lot of that stuff. And so we're here to be agents, right? If players need help with stuff, we're here to help them with stuff. They need us to handle travel booking. We can take care of things like that, just little things like that. If they need someone to make their life a little easier, we're here to help with that stuff. But most players honestly do a lot of that themselves, or they have their wife handle it if they're traveling with the family, because it's easier because maybe she's coming in and out of the Airbnb more. Like, it just makes more sense for her to book flights and lodging and some of that stuff. So we're here to help, but a lot of it pretty much sticks to sponsorship stuff.
What's something that people maybe wouldn't expect in terms of expenses or the lifestyle of professional golfers? And this answer, of course, can vary amongst PGA Tour, Korn Ferry Tour, PGA Tour Americas, LPGA Tour, Epson Tour. What's something people maybe wouldn't expect?
It's a good question, Chris. One of the interesting things that I think, much more specifically on the LPGA Tour, especially the Epson Tour, the Korn Ferry Tour, basically tours that are not the PGA Tour, it is such a big thing. Food is the big one. And just kind of thinking about meals and where the margins are. And if you think about like when it becomes very evident when you start following a player's, when you're on site following a player, like you just realize how much they end up eating at weird times, kind of vis-a-vis meals, right? If you're teeing off at 10 o'clock, like that's great. That's a very easy time to prep for and whatever. But when do you eat lunch? Are you eating lunch on the golf course? Are you eating lunch after the round? And so a lot of times it's like players really like to think ahead on like, all right, what's the food situation at 3 o'clock when I come off the golf course? Do they have lunch for me at the course? Is it just going to be cookies and box cereal that's sitting out? Do they have breakfast at the course beforehand? Like players legitimately think about all that stuff and they plan their schedules around some of it as well. Like you hear, if it's marginal, whether a player should play an event or not, these are kinds of things that truly can make a difference. Some of these like softer features of a tournament. And I think the other thing is that would maybe surprise people, or maybe not if they really like thought about it for a second, is just this idea of like journeymen, and how there's journeymen on the Korn Ferry Tour because the money is good enough, right? Like you see players who are 45, 46, kind of still trying to grind it. Can I get one more year of PGA Tour status or whatever? You don't see journey women on the Epson Tour because there's just straight up not enough money to keep doing it. all that stuff is very much just built on the promise of maybe I'll make the LPGA and all this stuff will be worth it. And you see people kind of have to pack it up at a certain time. There's rarely even journey women on the LPGA tour. I think players are much faster to kind of hit that point of, okay, maybe this isn't for me. But at least there's enough money on the LPGA to kind of say like, all right, if I broke even last year, I can give it another shot. But on some of those mini tours, it's tough. It's really hard to operate on the margins. And so I think that just kind of speaks to maybe this whole conversation is like, there's a very clear gap between the haves and the have-nots. The players who have everything going for them right now, particularly those players on the PGA Tour, the players on LIV, everything is great right now. Things are really, really good. They're playing for a ton of money. But shit, man, fields are getting smaller. Schedules are getting tighter. Things are getting more and more and more competitive than ever. The eye of that needle is just getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And there's going to be fewer players that kind of get let through. And then you think about the pressure that puts on players, because you get used to a certain lifestyle when you're playing really well. You get used to, I bought this house, I've got this mortgage, I've got these kids, and college costs, like, kids don't get free college just because you played pro golf. That's not really how it works. And so, especially for these players who are not Scotty Scheffler, Xander Schauffele, Colin Morikawa, Jordan Spieth, like these guys that are truly set forever. Some of those guys at the younger tier like start to think about the things that you and I think about every day in our daily life, families and how we're going to take care of things post golf. And because when it's good, it's crazy, crazy good. Right. But when it's not, it can get really, really claustrophobic, I think. And it gets real pretty quick.
You and I both have known people that, have gone up to the PGA Tour, had a little cup of coffee, had some success, had some top fives, made some big paychecks, and, haven't been back to the PGA Tour in 4, 5, 6, 7 years and are still grinding it out on with conditional status. And I just look at that and I wonder, how are they making ends meet, man? Honestly, like with the travel and the kid, those expenses at home don't change. They don't go down when you go drop down a level.
100%. But it's also like if you are going to make it, you have to be just insanely irrationally confident in your own skill. And if you don't have that, you're probably not going to make it anyways. Right. And so it's like, if you do have that, it's probably pretty damn hard to give it up. And so it's interesting, man, but that's why we love it, Chris. That's why I've been in this industry for 70 years and I hope another 70.
Well, Denny, I took up more time than I said I would. But we always
a pleasure to be with you guys.
Can't wait to hear part 3 with you, and we'll figure out a different part of your career that we never even knew about. But
yeah, I'm thinking about getting into golf course architecture. Maybe we could talk about that.
Well, Denny, of course, we really, really appreciate your time. You've given us all you possibly could. Of course, none of those players were your clients. Again, I don't know if we mentioned that, but that's a disclaimer we got to put in there. But I want to transition a little bit here, if you don't mind. We talked a little bit about players bouncing back and forth between tours. We got a lot of different interviews here on the back half of this episode, talking to some players with firsthand accounts, some caddies as well with firsthand accounts of how finances work in professional golf. And next up is a chat with our friend Steve Wheatcroft, who spent many years on the PGA Tour, many years back and forth on the Korn Ferry Tour as well. He's got some great perspective to share with us. How would you describe the lifestyle change between the PGA Tour and the Korn Ferry Tour?
The expenses don't change a whole lot. The money coming in goes down by 94%. So the hotels are the same price, whether I'm staying in Wichita, Kansas, or I'm staying in Charlotte for Quail Hollow. The dinners are the same price. You don't get a discount. You don't get a 94% discount at the Bonefish Grill because you're on Korn Ferry Tour. Nothing really changes. You just make a whole lot less money.
Is it relatively easy at the beginning of a year to budget what your estimated expenses are going to be, or does it fluctuate greatly over the course of the year? Obviously, the caddy payout is going to be dependent on how you play, but are the rest of the expenses relatively constant, would you say?
Yeah, I would say they're pretty well fixed. I mean, you can get a good idea. If I got off to a great year, if I win Sony, obviously maybe my hotel bill goes up another 10%, for the year, but maybe I start staying in some nicer places or rent a house here and there when I normally wouldn't. But for the most part. I mean, if I was traveling alone, I didn't care. As long as I had a nice bed, a nice shower, and, you know, it was in a good part of town, I didn't really care where I stayed. So I was trying to keep those expenses as low as I could.
Did you ever feel like any kind of a push and pull relationship with this money spent might be a great investment in my golf game, but it might not be, and I don't know if I want to spend this money on this right here, and gosh, that'd be a luxury if I was a top 10 player in the world, and I'd absolutely do it, but where I'm at, I can't justify. Did you ever feel that at your level?
Yeah, a lot. You know, you go to some of these events and guys are just spending money left and right, and you see what they're buying, whether they're buying cars or watches or diamond rings for their wives. And I remember kind of a funny side story. We were at Greenbrier the one year, and we were walking through the little shopping area down below, and I just happened to stop by this like watch jewelry place, and I was just looking in there, and they had Breitling watches, and I always just loved the look of a Breitling watch. And I was showing my wife, and I think my parents were there, and I was just showing them. I was like, it's one of those things, like, I'm not a watch guy, but I just love the look of that watch. And they're like, you should buy that. And I'm like, I've made like $7 on the PGA Tour this year. Like, I'm not going to spend $10,000 on a watch. And they're like, well, make yourself a deal. If you make X amount of dollars this week, you have to buy that watch. I'm like, fine. If I make 50 grand, I'll buy this watch. And sure enough, I had a putt on Sunday on 17. It was a par 5 and 17th hole. And I had like 8 feet for birdie, and I'm looking at the leaderboard, and I'm like, if I make this, I think I'm inside that 50 grand number. And sure enough, I jam it like 4 feet by, miss it coming back, and then I hit it to a foot on 18 for birdie, and I walked off, and sure enough, I made like $52,000 that week. I finished like 18th or something like that, and I wasn't even going to do it. I was like, nope, I'm not doing it. No, I kind of gagged that finish home. They're like, no, you made yourself a promise. You have to go do it. So I went in, and the woman's like, look, you guys get 40% off this week as a courtesy anyway. So like, even if you don't want it tomorrow, sell it. And you're going to make money on it. So I bought the watch. But that was one of the only expenditures I ever did. And the only reason I did is they basically made me do it.
Yeah. I was going to ask what your biggest splurge ever was after a good week of pay. Did you ever, never splurge or anything like that?
I'm trying to think. I never really had that huge payday. I remember the biggest payday I had, I finished second in Palm Springs, but it was like a 7-way tie. So I only made like 400 grand. And even then I probably just went out to a nice dinner or something. That was always a big one for me. It's like, if I played well and I cashed a nice check, I usually went out and had like a good bottle of wine and a nice steak and just tried to enjoy it with whoever was around me at that point. But no, I wasn't I didn't spend a whole lot of money on myself. I've never been that guy. And I think the other part of it is when you grow up playing mini tours and you go through that realm of like 4 years where, I think we probably talked about this in the past, where I remember calling my mom one time and she's like, are you eating well on the road? And I was like, yeah, I've got $50 set aside for dinners. And she's like, 50 a night? And I was like, no, 50 for the week. Like, I can go to Subway and it's like foot long sub, bag of chips and a drink with $7. That times 7, $49. And she's like, now you spend that on a glass of wine, at the right places. But like, when you live that lifestyle of being so frugal on the road, because you know that you need that money for entry fees or for gas to get you to the next event, even when you get to the PGA Tour, and I'm sure we'll talk about this coming up, it's like you want that cash on hand because you never know when the next run of 10 missed cuts in a row is going to be. And you just want to have that bucket sitting right there. Even if there was a few times I had way too much money in the old checking account, but it just felt like it was safe to me that like just knowing that it was there. And if I went on a horrible run here, at least I had cash that I knew where it all was.
Aside from like golf related expenses, with a job that your week to week performance fluctuates greatly and your income fluctuates greatly, and you could be on a different tour as of next year at all times, how do you personally budget your own finances, your car, your house you're going to live in? And it was with all the uncertainty around that career. What is that struggle like?
I had absolutely no budgeting skills whatsoever. I just flew by the seat of my pants. I know that's probably not the answer you want, but it was just I don't know, however much it cost us. Like, how much are we spending per month? I have no idea. I knew we weren't living an extravagant lifestyle. When I'm married and have 2 kids, like we paid for our bills and we do, an extravagant, like a vacation here, but like I knew I can kind of see the overall picture and knew we weren't spending outside of our means by any means. So, but as far as budget, like I had no idea how much I was spending per month until after I retired and watched all my money go away. And I'm like, okay, how much are we spending a month? Like maybe I should start to dive into this on what the food bill actually looks like, or what, what is our total expenses every month that we have to live versus, discretionary versus extra. And yeah. So yeah, but I did not have a budget. No, I just kind of ran with it.
When you did walk away from playing professional golf, did you feel like you had enough money to retire on? Like, did you feel like you're
No, absolutely not. And even still, I mean, I retired after the 2019 season, and my best golf was played in 2015, 16, then 17 and 18 were okay. And then, I mean, I had a decent year on the Korn Ferry in 19. I think I finished like 44th on the money list. I made like $108,000. But I knew that was going to be gone quickly, and it went away really quickly. Obviously, when you started a new job, and my next job in the finance world was all commission based. So it wasn't like I had a set salary coming in, which if I could go back and redo it all over, I would have done it completely different because I needed some sort of stability. It would have been nice to have like an actual paycheck coming in every week or 2 weeks. But no, I knew when I was done that it was never going to be like hey, you're set for life. No, God, no. It was the exact opposite of that. It was, my God, I have to get some money back in the door quick here. Like I have a little bit of a buffer, but I was shocked at how fast that went away.
So you had, between Korn Ferry Tour and PGA Tour, over the course of a career, it looks like you had about $4 million in career earnings. How much do you think you would have had to earn on the course to have been able to walk away from golf and been fully comfortable being retired?
Like not work again?
That's a hard, I guess so. But I know almost everybody works in some capacity after leaving golf, either in media or doing out, whatnot. But
20,
25,
and what your listeners are going to absolutely laugh at, right? So I took what I did on there. I had $4.1 million in career earnings on the course. And let's say I made another $1.2 million off the course in endorsement deals, right? So there's $5.3 million. And then I broke that down over a 14-year stretch. It came out to like $398,000 a year, minus $125,000, we'll call it, a year for expenses. Average, Korn Ferry and PGA Tour, somewhere up, somewhere down. And then tax that at, I think I did 25%, just kind of a median over, some years where I was in the 38%. Some years I was in whatever. But it came out to, I think it was like $191,000. Again, these are rough estimates on all this stuff, but $191,000 a year job for 14 years. If you did that job, do you think you could retire after that was done? By the way, you haven't paid any bills at home yet.
I was gonna say definitely not with what three young kids costs.
Yeah, I've got 2 kids, so yeah. I mean, I don't have 3, but I've got 2, and it's if you're making $191,000 a year and you haven't paid any of your bills at home, you haven't paid your mortgage, you haven't paid your electric, you haven't paid it, and like, no, you can't retire on that. You're just hoping that'll cover the year, right? So no, it's. Once you start to look at the numbers, it looks great when people go on there and they're like, wow, I wish they would change like total earnings to total earnings divided by how many years you played, times tax rate, something on there. Cause everybody's like, dude, you made $4 million. I put something online a couple weeks ago about, I was looking for help getting Indiana tickets for the national championship game. And I had 4,000 people write me back on Twitter saying, you're so cheap. You made $4 million on the PGA Tour. Go buy your own tickets. I was like, all right, man, if you really want to get into the nuts and bolts of this, we can talk, but no. It's like, yeah, it looks great. $4 million is a lot of money, but spread that thing out over 14 years and tax it and take your expenses out. And I mean, that's 14 years at $125,000 a year in expenses alone. There's 1.25 of it gone right out of the gates. Then take, another 25, 30% of that in taxes away. And then, by the way, you got bills at home too. So yeah, that's where that 20 number would probably come in. Because if I would, it's one of those things. If you would retire, if I'd gotten done with golf in 2019 and I had $6 million in the bank still, then yeah, we can make some things work with that, right? You can invest that, and you can find some place that you can make 8 to 10% on that and live on interest the rest of your life if you really wanted to. But I had a big hedge fund friend of mine tell me that one time. He's like, yeah, we just need to get you to $6 million and I can get you 10% doing this. That's great, Bill. I'm $6 million short. So I'm going to need a little help getting to that $6 million. Sounds like a great plan. I love the idea of having $6 million in the bank. I'm just around $6 million short of that number. So if you could help me get to that point, that'd be awesome. But yeah,
Hey, if you were in debt,
theory.
you'd be more than $6 million away from that number, right?
Exactly.
So,
I don't
it
know.
could be worse.
I loved that conversation though when he said that though. I was like, that's awesome, man. I'm exactly 6 million short. So if you could help me get that.
What can you tell me how the PGA Tour pension works for you in particular, and what you know about it from a wider span?
Yeah, I didn't really get into a whole lot of that when I was playing. I just knew that I could defer whatever the number is now, right around $20,000 a year. I could take that and put that away. That was the max we could be putting into a deferred comp plan with the tour. I know that it went into a bunch of different buckets. Once you play 5 years, you get vested. So basically every cut you made on the PGA Tour, you got a certain dollar amount set into your retirement as well. Just for making the cut, it was $4,000, and I'm sure it's up to $7,000 or $8,000 now. But yeah, that money would just, every cut you made went in there. And then after you got 5 years at 15 events a year, that money was vested, it was yours, and that was getting put away. So once I hit 45 years old and stopped playing professionally, playing 5 events a year, you had to start taking disbursements from that. In some fashion. I don't remember how I even structured it, but usually they'll let you take it for, a certain amount of years or things like that, however you wanted to structure it. So, but then the rest of it, there were certain buckets that paid out at 45, certain buckets at 50. And then the main one was 59.5, just like any of the other, required minimum distributions, stuff like that.
So what do those distributions look like for you now? What you have coming through now?
I'm taking, there's distributions coming from 3 different plans right now. I can't tell you exactly which one is which. One was $1,000, one's $900, and one was around $6,000 a month, which is great when you're starting a brand new nonprofit and you're not paying yourself anything as a salary. So at least you have something coming in. So the timing of it has been nice that I've at least had some other money coming in, but, yeah, so that was something that I had to start taking. But yeah, the rest of it is just sitting in there. And I will give the tour a lot of credit. They do a very nice job with whatever investment strategy they're doing here. But there was a time I remember in where was I at? Vegas. I was out playing on the golf course, and I got an email on my phone, and I checked it. And I was like, this is wrong. It was about the investment or the retirement plan. And I literally had to call, I think it was Ross Berlin at the time. I called him out there. I said, hey, there's a problem here. I shouldn't probably say anything, but I think we have too much money in my retirement account. And he came back to me like, I don't know, 45 minutes later. He's like, no, it's just been a really good year. Everybody's made a lot of money. It's just the investments that they jumped on were going through the roof. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to complain. But yes, the tour has done a nice job of investing. So I will give him that.
For someone at your level, what did off-course sponsorship look like? How much does that fluctuate from a PGA Tour to Korn Ferry Tour level look like? Who does the negotiating for that? And kind of how did that help, supplement things? And how did that fluctuate based on how you're playing? Were there incentives based in any of that?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to give you a perfect answer. I can tell you that my first year on the PGA Tour and the year, I mean, I had no business being on the PGA Tour. I think we talked about this in one of the, No Laying Up pods here a couple months ago. I knew I didn't belong on the PGA Tour. I finished like 206th on the money list that year. I made $310,000 before I ever hit a shot. I thought I was the richest human ever, right? And then in 2018, which was my 7th year on tour, my 4th consecutive, I couldn't get a club sponsor to pay me anything. Like Titleist, Callaway, I was like, hey, $50,000 for the irons, the bag, the hat. Nope, we're good, thanks. So the money obviously changed throughout the years, and I know, granted, I know that I wasn't the best name in the world at 42 years old, and I wasn't some young up and coming star. But it was definitely the heyday of it was back in that 2005 to 11 maybe window. But yeah, the ball shoe glove deals are interesting out there. I always thought that was a fun one for a lot of these young college kids because they sign with an agent, and the agent's like, okay, well, I've got, Titleist, their ball shoe glove deals, $40,000 on the PGA Tour. Well, then the agent would take, 10% of that or 15% of that, which I'm like, all that, it's a standard deal for rookies. Like, it doesn't change. If you're Tiger Woods, it's one thing, or if you're some, Jordan Spieth, maybe it's a lot more, obviously, but if you're a standard guy coming out there to play on the tour and, you're a Korn Ferry Tour rookie coming up, it's $40,000, whether you sign it or your agent hands it to you and then you still sign it. You want to pay your agent $8,000 to have him hand you a piece of paper. So those are the things I didn't really understand, not to get sidetracked there, but there wasn't a whole lot of money on the Korn Ferry Tour. If you got $20,000 or $30,000 before you hit a shot, it was decent between ball, shoe, glove, and some club endorsement deals. Actually, you probably get a little bit more than that, 30 or 40,000. And then any kind of endorsement, you could sell the hat for something or sell a sleeve. Just try to, honestly, you just pawn yourself off to whoever will put a logo on you. You gotta really sweet talk some people in some pro-ams and try to make some good partnerships that way. The PGA Tour is a little different. They're obviously a little bit more eager to spend out there, but even that dried up pretty quickly. There wasn't, again, I probably made we'll highball it and say $1.5 million total over 14 years of endorsement money, right? It's not like I'm just swimming in it. Scotty and Rory have $20 million for their shirts every year with Nike. So it just depends on who you are. Those guys have a crap ton of their money is off the course. The rest of us were, probably 70% of our money was on course. 20 to 30% was off the course.
On course cash, off course sponsorship. What other revenue streams exist out there for yourself or players like you? Golf outings. Did you participate in a lot of golf outings that are paid? Was that at your level? Was that a significant income source?
No, honestly, the easiest ones were like the Monday pro-ams when you were going to be there anyway. And it's like, hey, do you want to play this Monday pro-am? Do you want to come in? You'd come in 6 hours earlier. I was going to get in Monday night. Fine, I'll get in Monday morning and play at noon. And they'd pay you $1,500 to $2,500, something like that. I think they're up to $3,000 now. But I'm going to play a practice round anyway. Then I can just play that, make $3,000 or $2,000, whatever it is. Then play 9 holes Tuesday, take Wednesday to just hit balls. And so I played quite a few of those. I played way too many Saturday pro-ams after missing cuts.
I didn't know that was a thing.
Oh, God, there's a bunch of them. San Antonio was always the best one. And I remember looking at my wife the last year because they were the worst golfers ever. I can't remember I was probably better. I can't remember who the sponsor was, but they would bring a group out there and you'd play the, what was the Oaks course, I think it was the other one. Basically, there's 2 courses on site. So you're staying in that JW anyway. And you could fall out of bed and then roll over to the other course and play in the morning and you'd make same thing. It's like $3,000 or something like that. But these guys sucked so bad. They were the worst golfers and it's not the golf course to be on with them. And I just remember I went out there and I played and I made it like 3 holes into the event. And I had been I walked 8 miles already looking for golf balls. And I texted my wife from the course. I was like, don't ever let me play in this Saturday Pro-Am ever again. And she's like, I was going to say something last night, but you told me to say the same thing last year. But yes, there were Saturday pro-ams that you could play off-site a lot. Yeah, if you missed the cut and you were going to be in town anyway, they had off-sites that you could go to. The players actually here in town used to do a huge one. And the only reason I know this is because I lived in town, and if they were really struggling for people, they'd call me and be like, "Hey, man, you're local. We still need a couple people. We'll pay you $5,000 to go play, Timuquana or Sawgrass Country Club or something like that." But they were paying guys like Sergio. I remember $60,000.
Wow.
To walk across the street and go play, and he's like, "No, thanks, I'm good." And I was like, "I'll do it for 10, 12." But yeah, they had a lot of those. But the one here was always a huge one. But yeah, other. I mean, you'd get the occasional, hey, we'll pay you $5,000 to come play this one or that one. But I mean, I did maybe one of those a year, 2 of those a year, maybe.
You don't hear too many stories of pro golfers kind of blowing through their money, and you don't have to name names with this. But have you seen that happen with guys that you think would have, based on their on course earnings, like would be way better off than they currently are?
Yeah, 100%. Guys love guys buy really, really big houses for no reason. I think that's the biggest one that I see. These guys that, they have one child and they have a 9,500 square foot house with 7 bedrooms. It's like, you have a baby, man. I mean, do you even go to the second floor? There's a lot of wine collections on tour. Wine collection is not a cheap habit. Cars, somewhat on cars. Nothing too bad, I guess. But the one thing I see is a lot of times is houses. So they just buy houses and they take, a lot of people flying private when you shouldn't be flying private. It's like, yeah, okay, man, you've had a good 6-month stretch here. Let's not, you don't need to be spending 20 grand to get to this place when you could get a couple first class seats for $2 grand. But yeah, I mean, I've definitely seen guys blow through their cash way faster than what they should be.
I would think divorces would make up a fair amount of that as well.
I did not think that road, but yes, that's a great one. Yeah, and golfers tend to get divorced a lot. It's a weird thing. Obviously it's the lifestyle, but I think more guys get divorced when they get done playing than they do while they're playing, because then all of a sudden it's like, oh, this is a different life, and oh, you're home now. You're home every week instead of being gone 20 weeks. I liked it a lot better when you're gone 20 weeks. So yeah, you see a lot of that stuff. But yeah, that's a good point. Divorce is a huge one.
If you could go back in time to, like, let's say the Steve Wheatcroft of like heading out on the PGA Tour for the first time, and you could give that guy one piece of financial advice, what would it have been?
Don't be scared to invest some cash. Because I remember when I did go through a nice run, I remember looking at my checking account one day and there was $975,000 in my checking account. And I was like, I have $1 million basically in a checking account doing absolutely nothing for me. And even if I did go on a horrific run here, and again, this goes back to like just making sure your cash is there for bad times. And I was like, I don't need $1 million to do that. Like, I should have peeled off $500,000 of that and put it somewhere and try to make money on it for a few years while I'm spending the rest. But again, it was my pretty little number. I liked looking at it and wanted to keep it there. And I knew that, I knew it was just sitting there. It wasn't doing anything for me. But I mean, I probably cost myself $500,000 by not investing it back in the day. So I wish I was smarter about my money back then. But again, it just, could I have told myself that at the time? Probably not, because I was just so paranoid about having cash to actually be able to go play golf that's what I thought about all the time.
I know the answer to this question. You've got a putt in a PGA Tour event on the 18th green, and the difference is 10 grand in winnings. And you have a putt against me at Timuquana on the 17th hole, and the difference is, say, you would maybe lose $450. Which one hurts worse to miss?
I'm more nervous over that putt against you, and it hurts more to miss that against you, because I was always very good, because everybody's like, oh, you cost yourself $200,000 with that finish. And I was like, did I? Like, that wasn't my money. It wasn't in my pocket yet. If I hand you $450, that's my money that I'm handing you. But when I boned the bunker shot at Canada and cost myself $400,000, like, I hadn't finished 72 holes yet. So that, it didn't matter if I did that on the first hole or the last hole. The tournament wasn't done yet. And like, at the end of the day, after 72 holes, my position was here. That's how much money I made. But that money was not ever mine. When I lose to your ass at Timuquana, that cash is in my pocket, in my wallet, and I like it there. Now you're taking my cash. That $10,000 putt that I haven't missed yet on the PGA Tour, like, that wasn't my money yet. So that's all play money until it actually gets cashed.
Can professional golfers get oversubscribed to taking appearance fees for things? Is that a hard thing to ever turn down? And how do you balance that with your own schedule?
Yeah, I think 100%. And that's one of the first rules that somebody told me that too. And I don't remember who told it to me, but they said you have to get really good at saying no. Because when you first get out there, you just want to tell everybody yes, because you're going to have club reps come up and like, hey, would you mind trying this shaft? You're like, we know we're not trying to get you into this. We just want your opinion on it. Like, yeah, sure, give it to me. 20 minutes later, you just been wailing on drivers with some new shaft for no point whatsoever, right? Same thing. Like, hey, would you mind coming to this dinner to do this? Or we'll pay you $1,000 to come speak at this, or just come sit. And yeah, I'd love to do it. Yeah, do it. And then next thing you know, you're mentally just exhausted. And I do remember that, because I said yes to everything when you first get out there, just because you're so eager to be everywhere. But yes, you can oversubscribe yourself for sure. So I don't remember who told me that lesson early on, but I've told that to numerous people also. Like, make sure you're good at saying no. And if it's not something that's going to benefit you in the long run, you don't need to do it. Like, your goal is to go out there and, as much as I'm anti, make it a business, there does need to be part of it that is make it a business. And your job is to go out there and play the best golf and get your head in the best frame of mind you can at week in, week out to do what you're supposed to be doing. And the offsite dinners and those paychecks really don't matter if you're not playing great golf.
It's such an interesting thing of like something on the surface can be very obvious of like, would you like this amount of money to go to do this one day thing? And like, well, of course, that sounds amazing. And then you zoom out and you're butting up against, you might be butting up against something with that. On a micro level, it's super easy to say yes. Macro, does this make sense? Like,
right. The Hootie and the Blowfish, the Monday after the Masters thing. Like my agent one time was like, "Hey, do you want to come play in this?" I'm like, "Fuck yeah, I want to go play. It's Hootie and the Blowfish." Like, hell yeah, it's my first year on tour. I'm getting ready to go to Hilton Head. And so I played the Monday after the Masters Pro, and we went up there Sunday. We sat on some 100-foot yacht, had some, the whole service team taking care of us. We're drinking the greatest wine I've ever had in my life. And then we partied all night with John Daly on his bus. And then, next day played an 8-hour round of golf at Myrtle Beach, and then hung out in the House of Blues and just got smashed with Darius Rucker and John Daly and all these athletes. I mean, I had a blast. Hard to believe I shot a couple of 76s at Harbor Town that week or something, right? Like, because I'm still hungover by Thursday. But again, it's like at the time, I'm not going to turn that down. Like, hell, I'd looked up to John Daly and all these guys, and I would go hang out with them and party. And first year on tour, man. Again, you lose focus, but I don't regret it at the same time. I mean, there's a bunch of stupid shit I probably did, but I also got to, hang with Michael Jordan in the Aria Casino or Wayne Gretzky. And I hung out with Wayne, drank half a bottle of Grey Goose, and had to go play the round the next day in Scottsdale, even though, I shot 77. I was on my way home either way, but didn't feel great that next round. I can promise you that. But I'm not going to turn down stuff like that at that point.
You got to live a little while you're out there.
Like, you could shoot 63. I'm like, yeah, I could shoot 88 too. Like, I don't know. But I know I'm going to go sit and hang out with Wayne Gretzky all night and share some really fun stories.
Before we get to our next guest, I want to give a shout out to our friends at Rhoback. One of the reasons I love winter, it is layering SZN. It is time to bust out multiple Rhoback pieces. When it gets hot here in the summer, I got to kind of stick to the Blitz tee, the grit shorts, the stuff that's going to breathe. But in the winter, man, do I have options. I love the Hezi hoodie. I wear it probably 4 times a week. It's a no-brainer. I got it pretty much in every single color at this point. But I love to pair it with the Fulton vest, throw the vest on over the hoodie. It's not too hot. It's not too cold. I love the look. I love the feel. I just feel cooler than I actually am when I wear that. The Summit Fleece shirt jacket, one of the best pieces I have in my entire closet. It's trendy. It stands out in my closet because I do not have a lot of trendy clothes in there, and it is one of my favorites. And lastly, I want to shout out the Pace Performance crew. All of their crew necks are fantastic. They've got so many great colors, but the Pace, it goes with truly, could be an on-course item, could be an off-course item. I wore this at Pebble during the AT&T Pebble Beach Pro-Am. Go to Rhoback.com. Check it out, RHOBACK.com. You can use code NLU at checkout for 20% off your first order through the end of the week. Again, RHOBACK.com, code NLU for 20% off your first order. Next up is going to be Korn Ferry Tour player James Nicklaus. This interview took place a couple months ago before his recent win down in Colombia. James documents a lot of his financial journey on his Instagram profile. We talked about a lot of that stuff. Enjoy this interview here with James. We appreciate his time. You released a full accounting of all of your finances for the 2025 season. I'm curious, what compelled you to do that?
Yeah, I always wanted to keep track of what was coming in and what was going out, right? The pro golf journey, as tough as it is, and when you're on the Korn Ferry Tour, you rely on sponsors, you rely on people around you, the people at your home clubs to get you going. And then I've always just been that way, where I want to know exactly where that money is being used, where I could, I guess, not save money, but where I could spend my money smarter. So for me, it was just tracking everything down, and then also making it easier to just pay my taxes and write off, some of the offsetted losses at the end of the year.
So you track everything for tax purposes. Is all of your expenses related to golf? Are they all considered tax deductible? And does everyone do this good of a job of tracking it?
Yeah, so people don't do as good of a job, but they do probably have their own accountants and whatnot, and teams that are part of their agencies that help them. I have an accountant that helps me with this, so I keep track of it all. She kind of looks through it and is able to detect, what's 100% tax deductible, what might be 50% tax deductible. I know that there's certain things that are um, I guess, a higher percentage of deductible than others. So that is above my pay grade, but that's the reason why I do it. I track it all that way. She has all the information and is able to, maximize or I guess minimize my tax liability.
Talk to me a little bit about the balance between, wanting to play professional golf competitively, yet, competing on the Korn Ferry Tour, which is obviously less prize money than you would see on the PGA Tour, where the balance of at times trying to save money, but at times also making sure you can be at your highest possible competitive level. What's something you necessarily won't compromise on, and what are some things maybe you do to save money expense wise?
Yeah, my first year, I stayed in all the host hotels, and I quickly realized that I wasn't able to cook the meals that I wanted to. I had to rely on the player dining for breakfast and lunch, which doesn't meet my standards. I'm extremely healthy. My wife is a health coach. So for me, the non negotiables now are Airbnbs with a full kitchen. That way we can cook breakfast and lunch and dinner and not be reliant on going out or having to, be totally up to whatever the tournament provides us. And some weeks are better than others, like Savannah and Colorado. They do an incredible job at making sure that there's clean options and healthy options for us while we're on the road. But that's one thing that I will not go back on. I'm not going to stay in host hotels. I'm going to try to find Airbnbs whenever I can. And that might be a couple hundred more dollars in the week. But honestly, it's been cheaper than the host hotels. If I go to Bogota and I stay in the host hotel, it'll cost me $1,200 versus the Airbnb they got for, I guess it's in 2 weeks, is going to cost me $600. So there is, it does save money sometimes, but I'm not doing it to save money. I'm doing it to maximize my performance on the golf course. So that's one of the things on flights, right? If I'm flying from Florida to Argentina, I'm not going to sit in the back of the bus and, wake up 13 hours later with a stiff neck and not be able to perform. So investing, and that's what it is. It's an investment. Investing in a better seat on a plane is going to be one of the non-negotiables as well, especially for those flights over 4 or 5 hours. I learned that when I played DP World Tour 2 years ago. That was something that was really important to me, was making sure that my body was fully ready to go, fully rested, comfortable, and I didn't have those long trips, long journeys where I woke up with a stiff neck and then had to withdraw. So those are two big things for me while I'm on the road. When it comes to making sure my body and my performance is at its optimal or in its optimal form, I'll spend as much money as I can because that money's going to come back in, prize money.
You're playing this season 2026 on the Korn Ferry Tour. I would have to assume a goal of yours would be to play on the PGA Tour. How do you balance to say, like, all right, yeah, this, I want to, of course, make money in 2026, but the ultimate goal would be a whole heap of money, exponentially more than I'm currently making for my golf on the Korn Ferry Tour. Do you think like, oh, I don't need to obsess over expenses at this level because there's a much bigger play at hand here of, not only am I trying to make money to survive this year, but I'm trying to qualify and ladder up to the biggest financial opportunities?
100%, right? So I look at my year, I look at my sponsors and I say, okay, what money's coming in? This is my base. This is what I can work off of, and I can make $0 and break even if I spent this. So I have that number in the back of my head. And then I also know that I'm going to make some money on the Korn Ferry Tour. We're playing for $1 million every week, right? The winner gets $190,000. You can make some money on the Korn Ferry Tour, which is a great tour in my opinion. People don't really realize that, but you are spending a lot of money. I'm roughly spending $125,000 a year just for flights, hotels, caddy fees, rental cars, you name it. It's a very expensive feat, but um, there is that carrot at the end, right? You get a PGA Tour card, and you're going to make a minimum of $500,000 through their new program that they have, where that's the player. I don't know what they call it, but the player insurance program. And then on top of that, you're going to make probably another 500 if you're a marketable guy, right? You're going to have all these sponsors, Titleist and Ping and TaylorMade. You're going to have a club deal, but that's something that I've never chased. I don't really chase sponsors for the money if it's going to hinder my performance. So I'm not going to sign a 14 club deal with X brand if I don't play any of their clubs, right? So to go back to your original question, I view the Korn Ferry Tour as the stepping stone to the PGA Tour, not oh, I'm gonna go make a bunch of money and that's that, right? The money comes to make it to the PGA Tour. And if you're able to make some money on the Korn Ferry Tour, that's great. But like you said, I look at the money that I'm gonna spend for the year, try to at least break even with my sponsors and with social media deals that I do and all the extracurriculars that I do. That way, whatever I make on the golf course is profit, and then I can use that for, other things in my life.
Can you give us an idea as to what your income looks like from sponsors? And I'm curious if you know how that compares to some of your other peers on the Korn Ferry Tour.
Yeah, definitely. I'm not gonna give anybody any numbers because my
Sure.
numbers I are very different than anybody else on the Korn Ferry Tour. I might need to be fact checked, but I believe I've got the largest following across any Korn Ferry. I'm 99% sure that that's correct. I've got the largest following on socials. I've got the YouTube channel, and I'm able to get a much bigger number from my sponsors than other guys on the Korn Ferry Tour might, because I'm promising them 6 million plus views across my platforms per month. And, multiply that by 12, and I'm getting 75 million views on their logos, on their brands, on, all these different things. So if you're a Korn Ferry Tour guy and you get on a feature group, you might have 40,000 people watch you and you win the tournament, you might have 40,000 people watch you on that certain week. But if you're able to market yourself in a way, no matter what you do on the golf course, promise your sponsor 75 plus million views, you're able to get a bigger number. And that for me has been a big reason why I do all the social media stuff, in addition to inspiring kids to chase their dream and trying to get the word out and trying to showcase pro golf and all that stuff. So for me, it's a little bit different. And I try not to share all those numbers because I don't want to give people this unrealistic sense of what, it could look like if you are on the Korn Ferry Tour about getting sponsors. Because I have a lot of guys that come to me and they're like, hey, how do I get sponsors? How do I go about finding them? And I have all those answers. And I talked about it on my YouTube channel. I talk about it with a lot of players. And, you got to first look at your family and be like, hey, do you guys know anybody? Are there any connections that we've had as we've grown up? Do you know anybody that has a company? Do you know anybody that loves golf and wants to help somebody out? And, you can get $5,000 or $10,000 for a logo on your sleeve. But if you're a Marco Black, I mean, there's guys like Blades Brown and Neil Shipley who have done, amazing things. And for that, their numbers are a lot higher than guys that are lesser known on the Korn Ferry Tour. So the number ranges far more than I can even explain, right? There's some guys that are getting paid millions of dollars from companies like Callaway, right? Coming out of high school, like Blades. I don't know what his deal is, or guys like Akshay coming out of high school and not play, just getting paid so much money because they're, the next big thing. And then there's guys that are maybe 27, 28 years old that are rookies on the Korn Ferry Tour, have never done anything in their careers to prove that they're the next big thing, but they end up being the next big thing. But again, they're not getting those big numbers up front. So it's a really hard conversation to have. And that's something that I've always wrestled with sharing. But for me, it's like, it's so individual from person to person, player to player. You got to find what your value is. And if you can provide more value, you're going to get paid more from the sponsorship side.
You also have, the content you create both on Instagram, YouTube, that requires an investment, not just of your time, but also a financial investment into those channels as well, I assume.
Oh, I mean, I spent $35,000 kickstarting my YouTube channel last year, and I didn't see any return on that income because in order to start making money on YouTube, you got to have over 10,000 subscribers. You need to have all these requirements. But now it's actually a big moneymaker for me, and that was a investment that I had to make. I think it was probably actually closer to 50,000 at the end of the year when everything was said and done. And, I had to buy equipment, I had to hire a guy, had to pay him and his guys. So yeah, it is. But that's the investment that I was willing to make. And now it's starting to pay off, not only in AdSense on YouTube, but in the increased sponsorship money from my sponsors and club companies and whatnot.
What's something that the best PGA Tour players have access to that you would love to have? Like something they can afford that helps them greatly with their golf, but also only makes sense to have if you're making millions of dollars. It's got a little bit circular, a little bit chicken and egg there, but what's something that Scotty Scheffler would have access to financially that you would love to have access to?
That's a very interesting question. And I think it is chicken or the egg. And I've talked a lot about this with guys. So Morgan Hoffman told me this in my first day I turned pro. I asked Morgan, he's a close buddy of mine. I go, Morgan, what is something that, I need to know as a professional golfer? And he goes, if you need something, you get it. I don't care how much it is. I don't care what it costs. I don't care where you have to go for it. If it's going to make you better, you got to get it. And in the end, it's going to pay itself back. Right. I know that there's some things in life that, okay, hey, I'm going to go on credit card debt. I'm not saying do that. but maybe, you're tight on cash and you don't know whether or not to buy a GC quad or a TrackMan or, a new set of wedges that because you don't have a club sponsor, whatever it is. If you're serious about this and you know you're good enough and this is going to be your career, you got to do it. And you got to take a leap of faith. And then I actually asked Harry Higgs, I played with him the first week in the Bahamas a couple weeks ago. And I said, Harry, what is your big thing with pro golf? Like, you've been on the PGA Tour, you've been on the Korn Ferry Tour, you kind of bounce between the two. And he goes, Airbnbs for me are the biggest thing. I want to spend my money on Airbnbs. If I'm spending an extra $1,000, extra $2,000 a week on Airbnbs, at the end of the year, what is it, $20,000? For some people, that's a lot of money. For Harry, he's been on the PGA Tour, he's made it, but he said it's going to make you feel better, it's going to make you play better. And then on the equipment side of things, like the GC quads, the TrackMans, it's going to help you prepare better. And then in turn, that's going to help you get further in your career. And like we said, the carrot is at the PGA Tour. You can go and be in the red every year, $20,000, $30,000. But then 1 year in the PGA Tour and you wake up and you're like, wow, I've got a lot more zeros on my bank account than I used to. So I don't want to talk for other people because it's much easier when you have a great backing, right? I came from a great family and my parents supported me right out of college. And I'm not going to lie and pretend that, I could just spend money that I didn't have. It's like my parents were like, hey, like, what do you need? Let's get it for you. Let's make sure that you've got rent to be paid in Florida where you can practice. But I ended up getting my Korn Ferry Tour card my first year as a pro. So that reliance on them ended after 2 months. I turned pro in August and I got my Korn Ferry Tour card in December through three months. And the mental side of it, where I know if I fail, I'm never going to be out on the street, right? I will have that financial support if I need it. And that's something that I don't take for granted. And it's something that definitely helps people perform, right? When you're playing for status and not for money, I think it is way easier to play your best golf.
What does your mind ever? I've never heard a pro golfer say, I'm thinking about money all the time while I'm playing. But does your mind ever wander on the golf course about, on certain shots or you get into certain situations about what that might impact your income financially for the week? Or are you able to completely separate the money aspect while you're actually playing the golf?
Yeah, on the Korn Ferry Tour, it's sort of, if you don't win, the money's not going to change your life, right? It's like I finished third at the last event of the last season. I made like $70,000, which is amazing. But is it going to change my life? No. So I think that's why I'm not really thinking about it. When I was in sixth place at the U.S. Open this year, and the sixth place took home $1 million and exemption into next year's U.S. Open. Yeah, now I'm thinking about it a little bit more, right? Like that's a little bit different. But at the end of the day, it's like you said, we're chasing a PGA Tour card. We're not chasing a financial gain right now. That would be great if it happens. That's great, if it comes along with it. But I doubt it. A guy like Johnny Kiefer last year on the Korn Ferry Tour, who absolutely tore it up, was thinking about, if he was making $50,000 or $70,000 versus on a putt, right? It's like he knew he had a PGA Tour card after week like 8 last year. And at that point, it's like, I'm going to make, if you play well and he keeps on doing it, you're going to make a lot of money.
Can you tell me a little bit about how caddy fees work? And are you covering expenses for caddies? Do players cover expenses for caddies on any tours, and kind of how their situations work?
Yeah. So on the PGA Tour, I don't think anybody would be covering any sort of expenses. On the Korn Ferry Tour and PGA Tour Americas, it's a little bit different. You'll see a lot more buddies and, friends or girlfriends and wives caddying for players on the Korn Ferry Tour and PGA Tour Americas. And in those cases, it's typically, hey, I'm gonna cover all your expenses. You're not gonna have anything out of pocket, but then I'll give you a percentage of my earnings. The way I do things, and the way that I would say 70% of guys, maybe 80% of guys do it, is they pay their caddy a base fee and a percentage. So I pay my guy $1,500 plus 8% for the events that happen in the States, and then $1,750 plus 8% for the events that happen out of the country. And then he's on his own for all of his expenses, his flights, his hotel. So again, he can do it as cheaply as he wants or as expensive as he wants, but he knows what's coming in and that, percentage potential that he might be able to earn.
This might be kind of a silly question, but I think you'll understand where I'm coming from here. Do you play golf for money? Like, do you play pro golf for money? Is that why you're doing this?
In terms of like the different tours, right? Like I played in the DP World Tour, I played in the Korn Ferry Tour. not to toot my own horn, but I would be making a lot more money doing something else if I was doing this for the money. So if I'm out there chasing money, then I'm doing something completely wrong. I kind of ask myself, like, why am I playing this game? Why am I playing golf? And it's because when I was 8, 9, 10 years old, I'd be, on a putting green somewhere, talking to myself, being like, this putts to win the US Open, this putts to win my first PGA Tour event, this putts to win. It wasn't, oh, this putts to win $5 million in an event, an X event, right? So when I think most players are in the same boat. Some players have great degrees in certain things that they can go out and find a job, but we're doing this for the love of the game. We're doing this to further our careers. And then, yes, like if there wasn't any money in it, do I see all of us playing and working as hard as we can? Probably not. Like you do need to make money to support your family, to support your life and X, Y, Z. But when it boils down to it, it's like when I'm on 17, like this week and I have a 15 foot of a par, the wind's blowing 50 off the left, and I'm just trying to survive out there. I'm not thinking that, if I make this putt, I'm going to make $8,000 versus $10,000. It's, oh, I'm going to make 15 more points, and that's going to get me higher in the points list, and that's going to be higher to a PGA Tour card. And then at the end of the year, I'm going to be in the PGA Tour trying to chase down, top 50 in the world against the majors, and then trying to chase down number 1 in the world. So when it comes down to all these expenses, yes, it costs a lot of money to chase your dream. It costs a lot of money to play pro golf. But at the end of the day, you're investing. And the way I look at it, it's like you're investing in the stock market, but you got a little bit more control over it. It's like I'm investing in the stock that's James Nicklaus, and hopefully in a couple years' time, that stock's gone through the roof and it's paying dividends. So that's sort of how I look at it. And it's kind of helped me perform and play my best.
Before we get to our next guest, I want to remind you, it is the time to visit Pinehurst Resort. At the cradle of American golf, Pinehurst is more than famed number 2, an anchor site of the U.S. Open. It is Tom Doak's masterful number 10. 4 historic hotels and newly built luxury cottages at Pinehurst number 8, the one-of-a-kind Titleist shop at Pinehurst, and the new Peter Millar shop. A trio of dynamic dining experiences in Station 21, Plate, and the upcoming Wiregrass. Pinehurst blends timeless charm with the very best in the game today. Visit pinehurst.com to plan your stay. Next up is a caddy on the Korn Ferry Tour by the name of Ryan Murray. Ryan is currently hustling to try to find a bag on the Korn Ferry Tour, and I wanted to talk a little bit with him about what the dynamics of that look like and how that works for him financially. So how would you describe caddy life on the Korn Ferry Tour, both for yourself and just caddy life in general?
I started on the Korn Ferry Tour last year, and because I'm so brand new on the tour, the majority of players that I've been seeking to work with are more so like conditional status guys or guys that are Monday qualifying into these tournaments. And so for me, caddy life on the Korn Ferry Tour is actually pretty hectic. I spend a lot of time getting last minute confirmations of, yeah, come help me out. And then, let's say I work with a player for 1 week and we finish in the top 25 during the season. Well, they're guaranteed an automatic start the next week in the next tournament. And then if they ask me to come take care of them again that following week, now I'm having to make all of my travel plans and all of my arrangements the day of or the day before I actually have to get on the road. So for me, it's pretty hectic for sure.
But come on, the players pay for everything for the caddies, right? They're covering that change flight cost for you, right?
Yeah. I'll say this. I don't want to fully call that a misconception. I'm sure that there are plenty of caddies on plenty of levels that have that happening for them where their players are covering their costs. Either I'm too dumb to have figured out how to make that a reality, or I'm just too naive and too inexperienced. But I feel like if you're a veteran caddy coming off of maybe like the PGA Tour or the Champions Tour, and you have over 10 years of experience carrying the bag for some very well-known golfers, you're probably going to be able to have a little bit of leverage to justify your player covering your travel expenses and then also paying you on top of that. But again, speaking for myself, I'm in that situation where I'm working for conditional guys that might be on the alternate list that week, and they don't actually know if they're going to get into the tournament. And so for me, all of those expenses come out of my own pocket because this is a passion that I am pursuing and I'm trying to be there for the players. And so whether some people agree with it or not, or some people think I'm stupid for doing this or not, I look at it as an investment in the long term. And I'm ultimately trying to get to the PGA Tour as a caddy for somebody that's a very successful golfer. And if I have to spend a little bit of money out of my own pocket right now to put myself in a position to get to that end goal, then I'm all for it.
How does that work from a budgeting standpoint, like for the year for you? Like you said you view this what you're doing as an investment. Have you planned out how much runway do you have to kind of pursue this, you know? And are you, I think there's a balance there both for players on the Korn Ferry Tour and caddies of how much is this me trying to earn the money that I get from the Korn Ferry Tour, and how much of this is laddering up to the potential that I, you know, could earn if I advance to the next level?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm again, take it or leave it. I'm kind of a leap before you look kind of person. I don't actually
figure that out later.
Yeah, I'll figure it out as I go. Like one of the videos that I posted a couple weeks ago in the Bahamas, I was talking about expenses, and I said that my food expenses for the week were going to be a TBD because I had no clue how much money I was going to spend on food that week or those 2 weeks. And I've just gone into this knowing that it's going to cost me money. I try to earn as much money as I can every single week, but most of that depends on how well the golfer plays that week, if I even get hired. So I actually don't have any kind of a budget per se for this. Last year, it was more so just I would spend money on my credit card and my wife would tell me to stop. And then this year, it turned into a little bit more of an intellectual decision where I created an LLC. I actually formed a business for me to be a caddy as an independent contractor. And so I opened up a business bank account. I opened up a business credit card with Capital One that has no limit, which sounds awesome, but at the same time is kind of scary because I have to pay that bill at the end of every single month. So right now it's just kind of, you know, I'm just taking every single week as I can. And I'm using this year as like a learning experience. And what I learned from this year, I'll put towards next year, and then I'll get a little bit smarter each year is kind of how I'm looking at it.
I know expenses can vary greatly on a week-to-week basis in terms of where you're going, especially for the international events. But can you take us through maybe like what a typical week would look like? And we're coming off the Bahamas somewhat recently as we're recording this. I would guess that's on the higher end of expenses. And then what maybe a more traditional Korn Ferry Tour stop might look like?
Yeah, Bahamas definitely tends to be one of the more expensive trips for the year, but I don't know. I either got lucky or I timed it really well, but my travel expenses for this trip just to me did not seem like they were very expensive. I mean, I bought a one-way ticket to Nassau and it was like $280. I mean, I live in Nashville, Tennessee. I can't even fly to Phoenix, Arizona for $280 like on Southwest Airlines, for crying out loud. So, you know, I think in total for 2 weeks in the Bahamas, I was maybe a little over $4,000 in expenses, which to me this doesn't seem like a lot. I mean, $4,000 is a lot of money, but to go to the Bahamas for 2 weeks on 2 different islands with 3 plane rides and 2 hotels, like it just didn't seem like it was that much. I will tell you that one of the things that a lot of caddies, I would say almost every caddy on the Korn Ferry Tour tries to do this every single week, and they try to share housing as much as possible. So you'll have guys that'll get an Airbnb, and you might have 4, 5, 6 guys in one Airbnb splitting that cost. For me, I was fortunate this year. I was able to split a hotel room with 2 other guys in Nassau at the Atlantis Resort. So, you know, a large hotel bill got chopped in a third, which was huge. And then the second week when we were in Abaco, I was able to split a hotel room with 1 other guy. So, you know, like an $850 hotel bill for an entire week gets cut in half, and now I'm only paying like $475. So that's one of the ways that a lot of us try to manage our expenses as much as possible, is sharing housing whenever we can.
What did the income look like for you for that 2-week stretch?
I made a big fat $0 the first week. I was not able to work with any players that were in the actual field, which is okay. I mean, I knew that was a huge possibility, and I was kind of taking a chance going out there last minute. I got super fortunate that I was able to work for Bryson Nimmer week 2 in Abaco, Bahamas. Incredible dude. I mean, I know it's not a money related answer, but that guy is genuinely loved by almost every single person on the Korn Ferry Tour. So if you ever get a chance to meet Bryson Nimmer in person, definitely take advantage of it. He's an awesome dude. I kind of took a stance not too long ago that I don't want to share like the exact details of how much money that I'm making currently for a few different reasons. But the main priority, or like the biggest reason why I don't want to do that, is I'm actively trying to find a golfer that I can work with for this season. And I feel like trying to share those details on social media or in interviews right now is probably going to hinder me in that endeavor. So I will say that I did make some money the second week. I took a net loss on the 2 weeks, and we'll leave it at that.
Net loss on the 2 weeks, but do you view it as a success overall? You know, I mean, you're trying to ladder your way up there. I imagine there's some networking that went into that first week. There's cost of doing business, and I imagine not everything is straight dollars and cents on a week-to-week basis for you.
Yeah, such a great point. I definitely looked at it as a net gain, a net profit on the whole trip for sure. Financially, sure, I lost a little bit of money, but I can't put a price tag on experience. I can't put a price tag on being able to be involved in tournaments. You can't put a price tag on being in front of the golfers. This is an industry where everyone that I look up to that has been doing this for longer than me, that has kind of coached me along through my career, has told me, if you're not at tournaments and you're not in front of these golfers, everyone will forget you and no one will think of you. And so, again, I took a loss monetarily, but profit-wise for the whole experience, it was massive. I mean, to be able to work with a guy like Bryson Nimmer that finished in the top 50 in points last year on the Korn Ferry Tour, has full status this year for the first time on the Korn Ferry Tour, is loved by so many people on the tour. The amount of other golfers and other caddies that I was able to meet that week in Abaco working for him is priceless.
Can you walk us through what your income and expenses look like in 2025?
Yeah, so I'll give you a perfect example. I'm currently trying to finish up all of my finances from last year caddying on the Korn Ferry Tour. I worked a total of 17 events for 3 different golfers on the Korn Ferry Tour last year. And I also did caddying on the side when I was at home and I wasn't at tournaments. And my total income last year was roughly $31,000. It's all pure cash. So like there's no 401k or health insurance taken out of that. And my current expenses right now, and I still have a little bit to go, but my current expenses are like $26,000. So I would say I'm probably going to either break even around that $31,000 mark, or I might even take a little bit of a loss last year total in caddying. So for me, I would say like a break even point, 35K. If you're making 35 grand out here, you're probably going to be breaking even on your expenses as a caddy. And honestly, that's probably low because there's 25 events throughout the whole year. So if you get a full-time bag and you're at every single event, you're probably going to have to break even around like $50,000.
So what do you do when you are off, when you're not working a week out on tour? Do you caddy at home? Do a lot of Korn Ferry Tour caddies just caddy at other local clubs? And how does that work?
Yeah, when I'm so I live in Nashville, Tennessee, and when I'm not on tour and it's not like a frozen tundra like it is right now because of this disgusting weather that we have in January. Yeah, I caddy at a couple different local private clubs, Belmead Country Club out here, and then Troubadour are the 2 places that I loop at when I'm not out on tour, which is nice because I can earn as much or more in a week doing that as I would if I was working for a guy on the Korn Ferry Tour. I do know that there are other caddies on KFT that do the same thing. I know a handful of guys have come out of places like Sawgrass, and some other guys come out of places in like Arizona and stuff like that. So it is a pretty common thing for us guys, like during the off season, especially, or, throughout the year when we're not on tour, to do that.
So one thing I've heard of happening is, and I'm curious if this is ever arranged between caddies on the Korn Ferry Tour and their players, is, you have a great season on the Korn Ferry Tour. You have the same guy on the bag for the majority of events, if not all of them. You graduate to the PGA Tour and guys step up and maybe want to make a different hire. Maybe want to hire somebody that knows the PGA Tour golf courses. Does that happen? Does that happen frequently? And it kind of is that part of the risk of, even if you get on a great, bag that's headed towards the moon on the Korn Ferry Tour, that you could get left behind?
Yeah, so I don't have personal experience to that. So my answer is going to be a little more anecdotal and just kind of like what I've heard while I've been out there. And that is absolutely 100% a reality. As a caddy for professional golfers, doesn't matter what tour you're on, I look at it personally like every week is my last week. There's never going to be a guarantee that I'm going to be carrying the bag for the same person the next week, because at any given moment, they have to make decisions on what's best for them. And the brutal reality of being a caddy on professional golf tours is that sometimes you're not what's best for that golfer. And a lot of times that could possibly happen when a guy gets promoted and gets a chance to go play on the PGA Tour because he earns his card up there. I mean, you're going to be playing completely different golf courses that you're not used to playing from the Korn Ferry Tour. There could potentially be, you know, for example, there could potentially be caddies that were on the PGA Tour for years and years and years, and they've got tons of experience on all the courses that the guys are going to play out there. And so I think in those moments, a lot of times players, they're always just coming down and making a decision on what's best for them. Sometimes those guys might think that a caddy from the PGA Tour with experience on those courses is going to suit their game better and it's going to help them be more successful up there. And then I know of people personally that have, you know, been able to stay on the bag of their player as they got promoted in the PGA Tour. And I think that's the one thing that we're all hoping for as caddies on KFT is we're hoping that we have a good, strong enough relationship with our player and that we work well enough together that if they earn their PGA Tour card, they're going to keep us on the bag. But I think if you're really, really humble, and I think if you're realistic about what this job is, you don't ever set an expectation that will happen.
Well, if you get fast forward to the end of the year, what would be, we're starting fresh for 2027. Where would you like to be? What would be a goal you're working towards?
Yeah. So kind of like answering this in two ways. My main priority for 2026, my only goal is to just find a player that I can caddy for the whole season. So I think what I would be looking for in 2027 is to have found that player that I could work for consistently and have them want to keep me on the bag for the year of 2027. Like that's my goal. I don't know, maybe I'm a sicko, but like I could care less about the money aspect of it. Honestly, like I'm doing okay without that. I just want an opportunity. I think that I really believe in what I bring to the table. I think I'm extremely confident in the fact that I can help people be successful. I love being around people that achieve great things. And, I just want an opportunity, and that's what I'm trying to put myself in position to get.
Lastly, DJ caught up with our old friend Lauren Coughlin with a few questions about how her life has changed with recent success.
So before you broke out on the LPGA, how would you describe kind of your financial situation as a professional golfer?
Before I broke out in 2024, I mean, I think for most people I was okay. Like, but you know, if I had one bad year, I was not going to be doing okay. It's kind of how I think I could describe it. You know, my expenses would drain my savings down pretty good if I didn't have a good year. I mean, my rookie year on Epson, both on Epson in 2017 and then rookie year on LPGA, I made about a total of $20,000 in 2 years. At one point, had to ask, you know, just for business purposes, you know, my husband and I kept our finances separate just because so I would pay all my golf stuff and then he would kind of take care of our home expenses, I guess you could say. But I mean, we were down to our last $500, I think, at one point. You know, I had to borrow $1,000 from him so I could pay my credit card bill on time. So now I'm in a very different place, I would say, thankfully, and luckily.
So we can see like what your on-course earnings always are, but how did your, you know, playing better golf, how did that change your off-course earnings?
Yeah, I would say my expenses have increased over the years just because, you know, it's just like running a business. The more money you make, the more you can put back into it just because you can. And so I do. One, my caddy is always going to be the highest, I would say, expense you're going to have because if you play well, they're making money too. And so that's going to be your biggest one. But I mean, I would say my first few years, you know, on Epson, on the LPGA, when you're really trying to, you know, save as much money as possible, my expenses were probably between like $50,000 and $100,000 a year. Now they're more like $200 to $250 probably, but easily. But a lot of that's caddy because you're paying them a percentage of your earnings.
So just so he has it, how do kind of normal caddy arrangements work on the LPGA?
I would say, so most of them, the very, very top players might be on salary, but the average caddy out here is going to be getting a weekly fee, I guess you could say, a weekly stipend. And that's probably going to be at minimum, it's going to probably be about $1,700 a week. And then most of them are going to be 8% for a made cut and 10% for a win.
Any lifestyle changes since your big breakout? Jupe life?
Yeah, Jupe Life is definitely one. You know, we have our house in Charlottesville, Virginia still. I guess technically Ruckersville, Virginia still. And then we did just buy a condo down in Jupiter for winter, snowbird, Jupe Life, all of that. Bought a condo down there. I bought the car that I've always wanted. I got a 2025 Toyota 4Runner. And then I got my husband a boat as well. He's a big fish guy, so.
What kind of boat? What are we looking at?
It's a 2020 25-foot Carolina skiff, light blue.
What's the name?
So it's kind of for services rendered when he caddied for me at both Evian and Chevron last year, or in 2024. Obviously I wasn't paying him because he's my husband. And so I kind of told him in exchange for what he would have made in percentage, I would buy him a boat. And so, obviously played really well at Chevron, and that's when I told him I would do it. And then after he caddied for me at Evian and I did really well there too, I kind of told him, I was like, well, I guess it's got to be a bigger boat now. And then
True Jaws situation.
But yeah, so we're going to call it, though, in honor of both the Chevron and Evian, we're calling it the Chevion.
I like it.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to another episode of the No Laying Up podcast. This episode was edited and mixed by Charlie Van Kirk. If you'd like to provide any feedback on this episode, you can always email me, solly@nolayingup.com. We will continue to do deep dives like this into different parts of money in the golf world. If you have any questions or any ideas for future episodes or anything we did not cover in either this part or the sponsorship episode we did last year, please let me know, solly@nolayingup.com, and I will certainly get eyes on it. We greatly appreciate you listening, and we'll see you back here next week.